Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinars, Democratizing the ETL Process, How Abebooks Increased ETL Literacy by 150% with Matillion and AWS. My name is Ryan Peterson. I'm from AWS, and I'll be your speaker and moderator for today's webinar. I'm joined today by Ed Thompson, the CTO from Matillion, and Dimitri Anoshin, a data engineer at Abebooks. We all know that to become a data leader, we're finding that organizations are scaling as a result of getting the right insights and information from their data. Organizations that become data-driven are often outperforming their competitors, and we see that throughout every industry globally. To become a differentiator, though, you have to really look at data outside of what you contextually would used to see. So we used to find data was just in structured formats sitting in databases, and that's about the only thing we would look at. But today's new type of analytics looks at everything from real-time information like streams, image recognition, and puts predictive analysis on top of information. So for example, if you wanted to look at how many sales you will be doing and not just how many sales you've had, you may need to add some prediction to that methodology to figure out what's happening and potentially add in other information about outside effects, such as weather and things like that that could impact your sales. But the old way of thinking about this was that you would take a whole bunch of different data silos and you put them into a data warehouse, and then you would bring BI out of that. And we saw those were initially in the terabytes up to petabyte scale. We didn't usually see any kind of relational data sources getting much larger than that. But in the next generation, we found that you needed to have both a data warehouse and a data lake, sometimes using just a data lake or sometimes just a data warehouse. But we really required the process of ETL to get that data into the right formats so that you can get all of the access to the information that you want to use. The scale of these new environments we've seen go up into the exabytes of scale. It may be because your organization is really focusing on large content, whether it's images or video. It may be because you're accessing log analytics data and bringing that in from various different sources. But a lot of information means that you have larger amounts to look through. It means that if you do it right, you can get a lot more data and insights from your information. At AWS, we have a pretty consistent story around data lake on AWS. It starts with S3 at its core, and it allows you to store everything you'd ever want to store with as much scale as you can think of. Now, outside of that, we have various processing engines and things like that, but the partner applications that come around that data lake and surround it now allow you to do various things that you couldn't previously do. So we'll discuss a little bit more with Matillion on how they can get information in and out of the data lake. We want to make sure that we handle all of these privacy regulations and other PCI and other regulations for you to the point at which it goes to the hypervisor. And above that, we look to the organizations to handle the rest. But we try to make sure that those compliance regimes that any of your industries may require are all taken care of. We talked a little about S3. S3 holds trillions of objects, regularly peaks at millions of requests per second. It's a very, very, very large data store. The ability to scale infinitely into S3 is what makes it really valuable. And S3 on top of that comes with 11 nines of durability, geographic redundancy, and automated replication. It means you can run S3 across multiple different regions in the globe and have single repositories that can hold all the information for your organization. We're really humbled to see all of these different organizations that have utilized our data lake processes and have relied on AWS to take care of this information for them. On top of that, we've got a great new customer that wants to talk about what they've been doing with us and Matillion. And so I want to introduce Dimitri Anoshin to come and talk about what they're doing with Abebooks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dimitri, and I'm data and BI engineer at Abebooks. And today I'm going to cover our story, how we migrate to the cloud, and how we're choosing ETL tool for us, and why we pick up Matillion and what we can do with Matillion. Before we going forward, I would like to cover a brief about Abebooks. And Abebooks, it's online marketplace for books, art, and collectibles. On top of the slide, you can see different product segments that you can find on our website. And we have more than 350 million listings. And we have used books, we have maps, we have arts, For example, you can find the first signed copy of Harry Potter or any other unique books that really good for collections or investment. And we have two offices, one of the in Victoria, BC, Canada, and another in Düsseldorf. And on the picture, you can see the beautiful downtown of Victoria. And I personally really enjoying this city and the weather here. And the main point about Abebooks and Business Intelligence Data Warehouse that we have quite small team, just 3 person that manage the data warehouse, business intelligence, and ETL solution. That's why during the consideration, like what is the future of business intelligence data warehouse at Abebooks, we were looking for the tool that can simplify our life as a core team and how we can actually involve more business users. And this slide, you can see quite common architecture, and I think most of organization has the same architecture. And this architecture was before we moving to the cloud, moving to AWS, and it's quite similar. We have different relation databases as a source. We're using scripts loading our data warehouse, and finally we have multiple solutions for reporting, such as Crystal reports. Of course, the Excel spreadsheet was the most popular, and the SQL. And also we collect some files from external SFTPs. And it was a long time while working in this pace, and everything was good, but of course, the BI data warehouse team was a kind of the bottleneck, and sometimes we have issues with the growing data or some challenges with ETL and like how we can troubleshoot ETL, how we can improve this. I will talk about this later. And okay, let's move to the story how we actually decide to moving to the cloud. We realized that the current infrastructure not scalable enough. It's not good. It's not cover business requirements. And since we're working for the business and we would like to add maximum value to the business, we understood that we should move to the new architecture. We should design new architecture. We should need to bring new tools on place. And one of the key thing was what ETL tools we should use, because we already adopted Tableau as a BI tool, and we decided to move to AWS and Redshift, but we didn't know what is about ETL tool, which one pick up, because our team have different experience with ETL tools. We work with some legacy enterprise tools, we work with open source, we work with the scripts. What approach was the best, we didn't know. And as a result, we defined multiple criteria, and then we defined use case and just brought different tools and started to do comparison of those tools. And among our criteria was, for sure, we want native Redshift drivers, because most of the ETL tools a year ago, they provided Postgres JDBC driver that should serve your driver for Redshift. Of course, we would like to cover use cases, then we can capture data changes from relational database, because majority of our sources is relational database. That's why we want the clear path how we can capture all changes. And since our team was a kind of bottleneck for our company, we would like really simplify the use of ETL, because our legacy principle with ETL script, it was reliable, it was good, but it was really black box for end users. Even for ourselves, sometimes then you don't look to the script long time, and then you've got the issue. You need to uncover this script with thousands of lines of code, and you need to start going through the code to find the spot where was the issue happen. And all logging that was available is basically the logging that you set. And if it's not enough detail, then it's difficult to spot the issue. That's why we really want the tool was friendly. And of course, we need some best practices like version control, monitoring, and the price should be cost efficient for the cloud. And we did compare multiple tools, and among them was Matillion, and we were a bit skeptical. Then personally, I was a bit skeptical, and the first time I heard about Matillion, how it is good with the cloud and especially with Redshift, because previously I tried different ETL tools and I found that they kind of like bottleneck because they try to process all data from through themselves. Even if I just would like to upload file to S3 buckets, they still are kind of like trying to read the file and then upload, and or they didn't have native integration with Redshift, and the maximum what I could do is just place the SQL code inside of the ETL tool company and kind of like to use the ETL tool is a scheduler. And we decided to pick up Matillion, and here's the why. Because most of our infrastructure based on AWS, and Matillion was built for Redshift and built for AWS, and it's good because basically Matillion is running on top of EC2 instance that live in our virtual private cloud where we have Redshift, where we have other instances, and we can use different AWS features, and we can really expand the default capabilities of Matillion just because it's built on native AWS, and it's dramatically increased our speed of ETL work. And even our first project, like proof of concept, that we decide, okay, let's do the marketing data source, bring it to the data warehouse and build some fact tables, dimension tables, and set this daily load job. We finished this task quite fast, and we learn Matillion quite fast, and the support of Matillion was awesome. Like basically we ask the question, and next day we get detailed answer with how to do this, what approach you can take, and all this help us to move really fast. And as a result, the speed of development it's increased dramatically, as I mentioned. And Matillion is good because it's already supported lots of predefined data sources. For example, previously, if we need to grab any data from using API or whatever, we need to code. But right now, the Matillion provides you with already predefined data source. For example, if you want to grab data from Facebook or AdWords, all what you need, you can just use these components, provide your credentials, and then here you go, you start consuming your data load into Redshift. And the final point is of use for the technical and business users. It's okay for technical users. We can accept different level of using. It could be scripting, it could be coding. It's okay for us. But since we would like to involve the users, and because we clearly understood that if we want to move faster, and if Abebooks wants to drive more insight, we need to involve the business teams in developing of data warehouse and to work with the data. And also, if they have any questions, they can self-serve going to ETL tool and use the data lineage option, basically to track down the metric or troubleshoot. If something wrong, they can go into the ETL tool and look using visual interface. They can look what's the problem. And I would like to tell one story about our marketing team. We had a marketing analyst who never worked with ETL previously. He has some knowledge of SQL, some knowledge of BI tool, but never worked with ETL. And he learned Matillion quite fast using the available tutorials and using our help. And as the first project that he built, they built the complete ETL job of integrating with AdWords and getting data from AdWords. And for example, we never had AdWords data in our data warehouse previously because this was such a big project with the scripting to write the code to using Google API and getting the data. But with Matillion, our business user with some advanced skills in the SQL was able to figure out how to use Matillion to set up the job and load daily into Redshift AdWords data, just driving more insights. And we continue to expand this since our business team starting to look into different data sources. Some of them look into the Jira, another look to Salesforce, Facebook, YouTube, all those data sources we are getting. And the good news that our team, data warehouse and BI team, they're not really involved this anymore, and we can focus on more core features. And this is our current architecture. We still have the same relational databases, but also we get NoSQL database for our listing inventory because we need something scalable and fast, and we start using DynamoDB. We have external APIs, we have SFTP, and we have different apps. And most of the apps Matillion cover with built-in sources. And also with every release, they release something new. And especially they really listen to their customers, because personally for Abebooks, we talked exactly what we want to cover our use cases, and we found those features in the new releases of Matillion. And we manage all our data warehouse in AWS Virtual Private Cloud, where we have Tableau, we have Redshift, we have EMR, and we have S3 buckets that serve us as a data lake. And the good news here about Matillion, what we're enjoying this, Matillion is a not really powerful instance. It's quite small EC2 instance that orchestrate the whole your data warehouse. And basically for the Matillion, it doesn't matter how big your data set, because this is orchestration tool that get data from the source, load to Redshift, but not actually touching the data. This is true ELT approach. Then you first extract data, then load data into the target and starting transformation this. And using Matillion, we can extract data from all our sources, even NoSQL databases, load into S3 bucket and then Redshift. And then using Matillion, you're not seeing everything what's going under hood, because with your default way working with Redshift, you need first put data into S3 bucket and then using copy command to put it in Redshift. Using Matillion just specify your source and target, like source, this is DynamoDB table, target Redshift table, and Matillion will do the rest for you, provide you clear notification and clear logging that you can see step by step what's going on exactly. And I would like to talk a bit about our end user experience, because as I mentioned, we really focus to adding value for the business. And before we start our project, we conduct the BI survey, and this is a really good way to get feedback from the customers or end users. In our case, it's the business user. We would like to hear their voice and know exactly what the pain points for them. And it was some of them were really obvious, some of them were new for us, but most of them related to complexity of our data warehouse solution. Our ETL looked like a black box, a lack of notification, a lack of documentation, and it was tough for them. And the problem that we as a BI and data warehouse team, we didn't have enough time to address all those issues, because we just spent most of our time for development, because we couldn't use any help from business users, because the technical bar was really high for them. And using the Matillion, we addressed lots of those things and improving this, and involving business user gave us lots of free time to doing the core integrations or design the data models or working with Redshift to sizing it and ensure that we have good performance. And I would like to cover one case with Matillion ETL and monitoring and notification. By default, you can use AWS SNS topics just to getting emails, and we found that our users started a bit annoying getting too many emails. That's why we started using Amazon Chime. This is the same as a Slack or any other messengers. They can create the chat groups, and using Matillion and Chime webhooks, basically we just trigger if something wrong or something good, we create custom notification that send directly to the chat group. For example, here we have example that the file is loaded and the business users, they get message in the messenger that everything good. And in the same way, you can create different notification if something bad. And we had plenty of them, special design for technical teams, for the business teams, for business domains, and also the business person who is responsible for the BI work at their teams. We call them BI champions. They now responsible to set all notifications for their teams. Another thing with Matillion, it's monitoring, because with the previous solution we had a lack of monitoring, and all the users got email, your ETL process is done, and lots of the text there. But now using Matillion logs, we could visualize everything what's happened in Matillion. And this is example of the Gantt chart that we visualize in Tableau, and users can self-serve them. They, for example, the morning start, the users came. If they didn't get any message in the chat groups about ETL is crashed, they still can go to this dashboard and look how their particular ETL was working. If they're interested in different data source, they can filter these and see, did they get all files, did they get all data, any issues, how long it take, and also we're using this to see how our ETL works day over day. This is example of the common ETL job and for Matillion that we set for most of our process. This is top level overview of this job. Basically, you start your job, then you load raw data, you're getting data from the source, load to the staging or data lake, and then you have the step of checking data quality, because sometimes you can load not all data, or you can get some issues. That's why this step is check data quality. Right now we're using Python basically to run different user tests and acceptance tests to see the data, to compare the number of rows and different other metrics, just to understand that is it good or bad. Also, we're using SQS, and this is AWS queue for trigger some other process. For example, this particular jobs will load data for the marketing or for the sales, and then at finish it can trigger something different. It can trigger the different job or trigger the report, whatever, just whatever you want. And Matillion can easily integrate different projects and different entities together, and using SQS you can trigger those elements. And also here we then we pass the data check. If everything good, we go forward to load our fact tables and dimension tables. And Matillion provides rich capabilities of transformation components. For example, in our case, we need to support dimensional modeling. It means we need to build fact table, we need to build dimension tables, and Matillion provide you special components that allow you to design your dimensional table, and it supports slowly change dimension options. That's why it's exactly what we need for our use case. If something wrong, where users get an ETL team will get the chime notification that it's bad, and also you will get the message with the error. And everything good, we're moving forward to integrate with our BI tool, because previously our BI tool lived its own life and ETL lived own life. For example, your reports scheduled 9 a.m. and you suppose that ETL will finish at 8 a.m. It's enough time to run all reports, but sometimes ETL could delay it, ETL could fail, but your BI stuff will go anyway because it's just scheduled to 9 a.m. That's why using, in particular this example, we're using Tableau and we're using TabCMD, and we deploy command line interface of Tableau on top of Matillion EC2 instance, and now Matillion can easily trigger different reports and data sources and refresh data. It means the end users will get the reports only if ETL is done successfully and it passed all data checks. As a result, again, we improve end user experience, but by providing them only high quality content right in time. And Matillion definitely help us to increase our service level agreement for the end users. And we collect feedbacks with the users, and they're really happy about this, and they enjoy working with Matillion because it's user friendly. Everyone who interested can easily log in and see data lineage, and they can get documentation from Matillion because it's generated automatically. They can always go to Confluence and see information about particular job, and everything good. Yes, and some of lessons that we learn. Then we're going to the cloud. You need to choose the right migration strategy. And in our case, because you can use the strategy like lift and shift, or you can start going by pieces. And we prefer going by pieces. That's why we just moving the marketing, then we move to sales, then we move to inventory. And it's important to change your mindset, because some things that work for you with your legacy data warehouse, and you have data center in-house, and you have servers and the database and all, and another server has the ETL tool. The things works differently in the cloud, and you should take this into consideration. But it definitely will increase the speed of development and reduce the cost. And do not scare open the black box. Here, I mean, with the migration, it gave us opportunity to review of our ETL process, because ETL process keeps the business logics. And we had two choices. Okay, we can just move logic as is, or we can actually extract this logic and see what was wrong and provide something to improve this. For example, one of our use cases with attribution model, we had really complicated attribution model. They coded in the script in the legacy data warehouse, and we had opportunity to move as is and save lots of the time. But we decided, okay, if it's not sufficient for the business user, let's try to reopen this and completely rewrite with Matillion. And as a result, we really improved this, and we found even some issues in our production attribution model. That's why it's always good to work close with the business users and review your business logic. And I think I'm done with my story with Abebooks, and I pass word to Ed Thompson.
Dmitry, thank you very much for that. It's great to hear the story there of Abebooks using Matillion. So hi everybody, yeah, I'm Ed Thompson, I'm CTO of Matillion, and I'm going to very briefly just take a step back from the great detailed explanation that Dmitry's provided there, and just talk about the product and Matillion in general. And then we've got about 5-10 minutes left, so hopefully I'll give you a quick demo of the product so we can see what's going on here. So hopefully, if I've got control of these slides, yeah, good. So Matillion, as Dimitri's kind of explained a couple of times there, Matillion takes a slightly different approach to most ETL tools in that we are a ELT first tool. We're built for the cloud and for the data warehouse. And this diagram here is really designed to demonstrate that in an ETL scenario, when you're pulling together source data and staging it and then transforming it, the difference with ELT, particularly ELT on a cloud-based data warehouse like Redshift, is that by doing the L and the T on the data warehouse, you get all kinds of great advantages. You get advantages of scale, you get all the performance and the parallelization of a really capable underlying platform like Redshift. And then by doing that in a cloud-native way, and really sort of doubling down and building into the whole AWS ecosystem, that allows us to build a product which is making use of all of the fantastic pieces of platform infrastructure that AWS provides, but allowing the user to really easily build them together into an ETL pipeline solution. And overall, what does that give you inside of Matillion? It gives you speed. Dmitry talked about the speed of development, but also the speed of the ETL processing itself. The speed of the ETL processing itself, we don't take too much credit for that. That's really Redshift doing the hard work of the actual data processing. But the speed of actually building those ETL processes, that's thanks to both the underlying platform and Matillion's just ease of use and simplicity. The simplicity is really, we designed the tool initially to be usable by any ETL developer who is coming from a familiar sort of legacy ETL platform. When we're working with those existing developers, what we tend to find is, because of the push down approach and because of the type validation that a database like Redshift provides, It also is a far less error-prone process by doing it in an ETL manner, and hopefully you'll see that a little bit in a second. And then finally, there's the scalability of the platform. So everything that's built on AWS, all the platform as a service pieces, hundreds of now services that make up AWS, of which Matillion uses a fair number, are built from the ground up to be scalable. So naturally, by turning those pieces into an ETL approach, which takes into account the data ingestion, the actual processing of the data, and then thinks about where it's going to go next, and all the peripheral things that go around that, you just get fantastic scalability. And again, Dimitri had a little testimony in there to the fact that he runs a very small instance. Most of Matillion customers run Matillion itself on a very small instance, like a medium or like an M5 large or X large instance, probably the biggest that you'd run. But the underlying platform, like Redshift, does the majority of the heavy lifting. Okay, so to engage with Matillion, we are exclusive to the AWS Marketplace. So you buy Matillion as an AWS Marketplace, and it launches as an AMI into your AWS infrastructure. It's not a SaaS service. You have full control over it. You have root access to the AMI that runs, and you have full control over the security, where the data is going, where it's coming in, where it's going out. But it still only takes 5 minutes to stand up in your environment because of the way the Marketplace makes it really easy to deploy software. We've got a 14-day free trial, and pricing starts from $1.37 an hour. We've also got a big support and SA team who are really designed to help onboard, and hopefully some of the things that Dimitri mentioned there, talking about SA team helping him through getting up and running in the ETL processes. So let's switch over to a quick demo, if I may, and I'm just going to briefly show you the product. Okay, so hopefully at this point you can see my screen. This is the Matillion ETL tool itself. And first thing you want to notice, of course, you're in a web browser. Matillion is a browser-based tool primarily, and all of the ETL building work will be done in the browser. And anybody that's familiar with an ETL tool will be fairly familiar with the sort of component-based approach that we see here, where we build out flows that represent our data pipeline. In this particular example, I'm looking at a transformation job in Matillion. So this is taking data that's already in Redshift and transforming that data. And typically customers are building data lakes, they're building data warehouses, they're taking complex, messy source data, possibly from disparate systems. Particularly in Dimitri's case, we saw 4 or 5 different disparate systems all being brought together. And generally, they're denormalizing data, they're simplifying data sets, and they're getting to simple, understandable analytic outputs that are suitable and ready to be used in a data analysis tool, of which there are many available: Tableau, Looker, QuickSight, a whole long list. And then what makes Matillion different is that all of the steps that are going on here in this process are pushed down to the underlying Redshift database. So to give you an example of what that looks like, we have a starting point here. And this is a flight table, a use of a flight data set here. And we see we're working with a reasonable data set, so we're working with 123 million rows of data here. And then the next step along here is a filter component. So you build your jobs up out of components, components for reading data in, components for joining data together, and a whole load of components for transforming data before finally writing it out. If we go to this second step in the process, where we've got some data filtered out, so now I'm working with 28 million rows of data. And each of these components has a set of properties that really guide you through the setup. So at this point, we get to a join, where we join on another data set. This is a small data set here, where I'm just joining on some plain information slightly messy data set, some plain information onto my main flights data set. So by the time I get to here, I'm ready to set up a join. Just to give you a feel for what it's like to set up a component inside a Matillion, I'm just going to remove that join and re-add it to give you a feel for it. You'll notice all the components that are downstream now have gone red. That's the validation that's been pushed down to the underlying Redshift server. Because Redshift is validating every step in this ETL process, that then makes it really easy or really reliable to the point where when you get everything validated, you know your ETL process is going to run end to end. So I'm going to re-add this join, and I'm going to bring in my data set from my flights and my data set from my planes. So to set up a join, all components in Matillion work this same way, and in that you have a series of properties which are guided. So everything guides you through setting up, and this is what makes and democratizes the ETL process. Makes it easy for not just ETL developers, but a whole range of data savvy users right across your organization. So we start with flights that took off. I say I'm going to call that my flights. And then I'm going to join that with, in this case, just one table here, which is my planes. And that's going to be an inner join, which is going to join those two data sets together. We can then set up a join expression. This window looks kind of a little bit more complicated, but it basically gives you everything that you need, including all of your Redshift functions, and guides you through actually creating the join between these two tables. In this example, it's nice, simple. I'm going to take my flight tail number and I'm going to join that onto my plane's tail number. This will validate as I type. So if I mistyped anything there, I'd get a validation error. And then if I OK that, finally, I just need to choose my output from my join. And at that point, that join pushes down to Redshift and validates. And now I can just tie everything together. So my downstream components will take all of my will take all of my previous joins. So I'm just going to set up that join there. I should fix all that. There we go. So I've fixed my job. And then ultimately what this does at the end is it creates a SQL statement which will be pushed down onto Redshift and manages all of that SQL. So you've got visual representation of your jobs. Other things that you get on the transformation side of the tool, obviously you saw the ability to sample the data at each and every stage in the process. That's really powerful for users when building ETLs because they know what they've done and what they've done works and they've done right. So if I sample my data on my join, I can scroll over to the right-hand side and I can see, yes, I've successfully joined the plane information to the flight information. So I know I've done that step correctly. I can move on to the next step. That's really powerful while building these things up. For more enterprise users, we've got the ability to understand the data lineage, which again, Dimitri mentioned a couple of times. And we can also go away and see exactly what Redshift is going to do when it's executing these data transformations. Everything that you see here can be parameterized, so we can build these jobs with variables to make them entirely reusable. And we get some customers doing some extremely sophisticated ETL work that makes reusable components out of pieces of ETL. Very, very powerful, particularly in organizations where lots of similar ETL projects are going on at the same time. So that's the orchestration. That's all on data that was already in Redshift. If I flip over to the, sorry, that was transformation. If I flip over to the orchestration side of Matillion, this is kind of what knits everything together. So this is the overall data pipeline from start to finish. You can kind of think of this as a script. And I've got a little example here where we have a start component. We create some tables. So these four squares here are where we're creating some tables. And then we do various data loads. And this is really just designed to show you the different data loads that are available. So we've got some data coming from a RDS database in AWS. We've got some data coming from a REST API using a generic REST API component. We've got some data coming from a good old spreadsheet. And then we've got some data that we load directly from S3. right at the start of the webinar, Ryan talked a little bit about data lakes. One of obviously the great relatively new features of Redshift is Redshift Spectrum, which allows us to load data directly from an S3 data lake from a data catalog in there. That's baked into Matillion, so you can use those data catalogs in transformations and orchestration straight off the bat, and there's really no difference to where you're loading your data from. All of these components support loading data directly into the data lake rather than moving it into Redshift itself. In this example, so we create the tables, we load the data, we bring it all together, and then we go and execute our flights transformation. And then we have a series of different sort of integrations into AWS, so things like CloudWatch, SNS, and SQS, to say what happens downstream, to send out notifications, alerts, and do monitoring. There's quite a lot of sophistication about what you can do with those components. And finally, if you want to take your data to the next step, you can push that data back into S3. So if you want to push it back into your data lake, or if you want to move it into a relational database, Postgres, MySQL, Aurora, you can use our RDS bulk output component. So that's the overall orchestration. We have a scheduler built into the tool, or so you can just schedule this to run as often as you like, or you can have it triggered from Lambda events, from data arriving from Kinesis in a stream, all manner of different ways that you can sort of integrate Matillion into a larger data pipeline where you're using other tools inside of AWS and around there. Obviously, there's lots more to show you. I'll just finish by showing you some of the data loading components. We have about 60 of these. Dimitri mentioned that we're kind of every new release, every 8 weeks, we push in new features. We aim to deliver around about 5 new data loading components every time we do that. But I won't go through them all, but you have hopefully recognized quite a lot of these popular ones like NetSuite and Salesforce, Google AdWords and Analytics if you're pulling in marketing data, and then some really sophisticated generic ones like the API query, which will connect to any REST or XML based API, the ability to get data out of RDS, S3, and then pulling things in from FTP, HTTP, Hive, Spark, etc. like that. So just about anywhere where you've got your data, Matillion should be able to get that into Redshift and start transforming it in one place. Okay, so I think at that point it's probably time to open up for questions. I think we've got 15 minutes left, so I'll hand back to Ryan just to finish off.
Thanks, Ed. I have to say, both what you talked about and what Dimitri talked about was a lot of very interesting, eye-opening things for me. I especially loved Dimitri's integration with webhooks into Chime. I think that's a fantastic way to update the customers and the environment. I think I may start doing that myself. There's a lot of great questions in here. This is a good time for you to add more if you have questions for any of the presenters. And I'll go ahead and get moving on them pretty quickly because there's a good 15. First question, Ankit asked the question, does Matillion offer APIs?
So the full product is covered by APIs. So that includes basically everything you saw in the little demo there, creating jobs, creating schedules, importing and exporting data. A lot of people using the API to sort of transfer between environments, so go from dev to tester live, or to push data. All the data behind the scenes in Matillion is exportable as JSON files, so there's no sort of special format. Everything's easy to read and understand with a bit of knowledge of the model. But yeah, full API coverage is the short answer there.
And I've just pasted a link to the API documentation in the question panel. So if anybody wants to click on that, they can.
That's great.
Next question I think is more for Dimitri. So there's 2 or 3 questions actually in here that kind of talk about competitors. People are asking, how does Matillion compare with X? And without naming any names, because I don't think we should do that here. What was some of the decision points for you for choosing Matillion over maybe other products in the market?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want exactly blame any other vendors, they good or bad, because every engineer judge in different way. But personally, I found that I can explain the whole market of ETL tools in two different categories, and I call it one of them built by software development engineers, but for software development engineers, and other that built by kind of like ETL folks for ETL folks. And I belong to the group with ETL data warehouse and BI folks. And I used to work with the legacy ETL tools that on the market for like decades, like Informatica, SAP, Pentaho, and I'm comfortable work with them. And it's clear for me, and Matillion belongs to those tools as well. It's clear for me. The first day that I started with Matillion, it's clear, and I feeling just okay. I shouldn't do this and this because it's basically covering my previous experience. But it was designed for the cloud. It was designed for Redshift. That's why here are the benefits. But in case if we will look at any other tools, especially currently on the market, lots of cloud tools, and I found that some of them built by talented engineers, but the one drawback personally for me, they require coding. For example, if I need anything out of the box, if I need to bring data from SFTP, even like sometimes then I evaluate them and I need to bring data from SFTP, there is no connection to SFTP like in any other ETL tool where I can just specify the host name, the port, credentials. It means I need to write the code to bring SFTP. If I want to do any transformations, it's again requiring to writing the code. And again, I didn't want to build the solution that will work for serve the purpose of data warehouse, and it's again will be kind of like a black box for the business user, because my goal was to have the business and user friendly tool that can do work really well, and that's why we pick up Matillion.
Yeah, good answers. Thank you for that. I think Kevin here asked a good question that I'm actually not clear on the answer for. So, how did you access the login information from Matillion so that you could report out on the status of your jobs?
Yes, we have two ways of doing this. One of them, this is default login. Then you run the job, because inside of the Matillion, it has MongoDB, but also you can use a relational database using RDS, and it stores all the data, everything what you see in the task history, in the process running, all this data is storing, and you can using Matillion API just grab this data, dump into the table, and visualize this. But because we didn't know this, we started in a different way. Each ad showed you that each of the component is kind of parameterized, and you can specify the parameters. And it has default parameters like start date, end date, component name, the text message if it's error or success, duration, number of rows. And what we are doing for every of our job, we basically we take this information from the component, for example, load the table, and we just insert into the ETL table. And the example that you show is just visualization of this ETL table that we built ourselves using Matillion components, and just writing every component finish the job, and it's insert the one row into the table with the timestamp, start, end, duration, etc. And this is kind of our pattern that we just copy for rest of the jobs.
I think it's a good idea. It's interesting to report out on your pipeline, which is a good move. I think this one's for Ed. Matillion can run in an HA configuration. If so, how does it handle failovers?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we can run in an HA configuration. The bits of the product that are HA, the HA setup is you set up a couple of instances across, well, as many as you want, but most people are running 2 instances across 2 availability zones. That's backed up by a Postgres cluster across usually the same 2 availability zones with the usual sort of active passive configuration on the Postgres cluster itself. Redshift, the Matillion front end maintains state, and the cluster, the scheduler is clustered. So anything that's going through the scheduler, i.e. anything that's scheduled, will be active failover. So basically, if either one of the nodes fails, the ETL processes will continue to run. If ETL processes that are in flight at the moment will fail, but then will be rerun by the scheduler on the other node, in future we'll have the ability to allow those processes to pick up from a user designated sort of waypoint, rather than having to start over from scratch. But that's not in there right now. That's coming soon.
Thanks for that one. So Dave would like to know if Spark and or Flink are in your connectivity list.
So yes, the Spark, yes. Flink, I'm not familiar with. So yeah, Spark's actually not in there right now. Spark is, we expect to release that in our next release on the 25th of this month, I believe. So I'm saying it's in because I've seen it's in, but it's not actually shipped yet.
Yeah, that seemed like a setup question.
Yeah, no, honestly not.
Perfect.
I'm not familiar with the second one.
Yeah, I think Flink is just a little bit less used, so I'm assuming if customers needed it, it would probably be on the list. But let's see. Viz asked a question: how about code maintenance? If I wanted to find out, for example, how many mappings a table is using as a source.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a feature of our lineage. So our lineage works in both directions. So it's backwards lineage and forwards lineage. So with backwards lineage, you'll be looking at a particular output table and working out how a particular column got populated, and what calculations and how many source tables were involved and all that sort of thing. With forward lineage, you can work out, given this source table, go and tell me all the places that it's used downstream. I think you had the word versioning in the question as well. So there is a versioning system built into Matillion, and we have Git integration coming early next year.
Perfect. Shen asked the question: what about some customized transformation steps? Could we, for example, use R or Python and loop that into Matillion?
Yes, you can. So we provide the ability to kick out into Python in an orchestration, but also you can write Python user-defined functions and call those inside of a transformation. And then you can wrap all of that up in a concept in Matillion called a shared job, which essentially takes a piece of ETL that you've written that does something, doesn't matter what it is, and it takes any parameters that you've set and turns that into its own component, essentially, with its own, can even have its own icon. So a good example of that is if you're traditional data warehousing, you tend to build a date dimension. Every project has a date dimension. Every project does it differently. But you could build a date dimension job, which accepted some parameters like when it started, when it finished, what columns were involved, and went away and built the date dimension so you'd get consistent date dimensions across all your data warehouse assets. That's the best example I can come up off the top of my head.
Perfect. Viz asked another question. We currently maintain a lot of documentation for users to track how an attribute in the warehouse table is loaded. Is there any way that Matillion simplifies that?
It does, definitely. So that does sound like a setup question. So Matillion has built-in documentation. So you can document your entire ETL process from end to end. And you might have noticed in my demo that um, a lot of the kind of pages had little yellow notes on them, and you can actually join those yellow notes with particular components, and then that will come through in the automatically generated documentation as these components do this specific thing. The auto documentation has all components, all of the properties that are set on them, all of the descriptions and notes that you put into the jobs. So really, you can get if you're the sort of person that likes to build out ETL processes and put lots of notes and little identifiers to aid understanding as you go, your documentation job is done for you at that point. It will just get generated by the tool.
Sounds like you make it easy. I think we're done. There's a couple minutes left, so we'll take one last question here. Are there any opportunities to fine tune the query generated by Matillion? I mean, and how would you know if it's the most optimized way of doing it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's not usually necessary to fine tune the SQL that Matillion generated. I've never known a customer need to do that. They do, however, find that they want to fine tune the way that Redshift is storing the data, and we provide a full set of tools to A, help you understand, and B, do that. So I'm talking about things like sort and distribution keys, the way that the data is stored, understanding the plan of the query that's going to be processed and working back through that. I've never needed to kind of rewrite SQL in a different way in order to get the Redshift query optimizer to do something nice. I've always found it's kind of more sophisticated than that, but also I think because the ETL components that we've built will kind of generate the SQL to the best practices anyway. And we tweak that from time to time when best practices change, and that's sort of transparent to the tool. As a final thing, if all else fails, you can write a SQL step as a transformation. So you can have, start a whole SQL step that you just write manually, and then the output. So that's kind of a nice fallback. If you really want to write the SQL yourself, you can. We're not taking that away.
Perfect. Well, on that note, thank you very much I want to thank the presenters, Ed and Dimitri. I also want to thank all the attendees for taking time out of your day with us. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again for attending. Don't hesitate to reach out. Take care. Bye-bye.